Welcome, everybody. How are you? This is Jeremy Hancher. We're going to start the webinar. We thank you for joining us for the first in EMAP's Sustaining Your Business series. We're very thankful that you're here, and we hope you have a great webinar. Just to give you an overview of who's joining us, we have a number of participants already kind of in the chat room, but we have a number of craft brewers that register. We have a few distilleries. We had a cidery, a winery, we had a brewery packaging manufacturer, along with a number of SBDC consultants and clients. We have some university affiliates. We have some small business environmental assistance providers and some environmental organizations. So thank you everybody for registering and for attending. I'd also like to thank Kelly Co-Francisco, Nancy Crickman, and Ann Gonzalez for help in putting together the webinar. And we're especially excited and happy to have Cheri Chastain from Sierra Nevada joining us. So just a quick overview of Adobe Connect if you haven't been on before. All of the participants will be muted. You can use the chat feature to ask questions, so we encourage you to ask questions as you think of them. This webinar will run 60 minutes in length. We're going to roughly have 45 minutes for presentation, and we're going to leave 15 minutes for question and answer. The webinar will be recorded, so we do hope to post it a little later on so that you can rewatch, or we know that there was a few people that couldn't attend with us, so that we were hoping that they could watch on their own time. And if you want to join the conversation, you can join EMAP, our Facebook and Twitter account. We'll be monitoring that as we go along. Or if you have any thoughts or any kind words that you want to share with us, please feel free to do so. So a quick introduction. This is myself. That's Jeremy. And Cheri Chastain from Sierra Nevada. So a little bit about myself. I've been with EMAP and the Pennsylvania Small Business Development Centers for a little more than 10 years, working with small businesses across Pennsylvania. I've been focusing mostly on environmental compliance assistance with a specialization on air quality, but I've also worked with a lot of small businesses across the state with energy efficiency, pollution prevention, solid waste issues, wastewater, and finding available sources of funding. Now, Cheri's been the sustainability manager for Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. She's been with them for 10 years and responsible for educating employees on environmental issues and programs, maintaining and developing policies and projects related to renewable energy and energy efficiency, zero waste, alternative fuels, and water conservation and reuse. Cheri also works outside Sierra Nevada's walls on policy and advocacy issues related to sustainability. She's a current member of the City of Chico Sustainability Task Force. She co-chairs the Brewers Association Sustainability Subcommittee, and she's a board member of the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council. So a little bit about this presentation. We're going to start off with a few trends in craft brewing, what's been going on, the number of craft breweries, etc. Then we're going to touch on some environmental issues, some trends, kind of what we're seeing here in Pennsylvania. And then I'm going to turn it over to Cheri, and she's going to talk about Sierra Nevada and all the great sustainability efforts they've been doing. She's also, I believe, going to touch on the benchmarking initiative with the Brewers Association. And then we're going to stop. Well, after her presentation, we're going to do some Q&A, and if we have time, we have some resources at the end. And following the webinar, we do plan on sending out a survey, so we would love to hear any feedback. If you want to hear a webinar that's very similar or something else that touches on craft brewing, please let us know then. So watch out for the follow-up survey. So this webinar kind of grew out of a growing need. I think a lot of us have seen that there's a lot of craft breweries that keep opening. They're starting every day. But I feel like now that a number of these breweries are starting to experience some growing pains. Now, a lot of these craft breweries, when they open the doors or when they're in their business planning phases, a lot of them are just focusing on writing their business plan or opening the brewery. But it seems that they're not really, or you aren't really paying too much attention on environmental or sustainability initiatives or efforts. So we thought this might be a good idea to kind of, hey, here's what's going on in the environmental world, sustainability. These are the things that you really need to kind of, start thinking about and taking forward. There are plenty of resources out there, plenty of different organizations, that's really trying to assist the brewing sector. I mean, naturally there is the Brewers Association, but there is also small business development centers. There's one in every state across the country. And then there's also small business environmental assistance programs, or what we like to term as SBEPs. But not only for breweries, for craft breweries, but there's also a lot of different supply chains or offshoots of craft breweries that are facing similar challenges. There's a lot of craft distilleries that are kind of running into the same kind of issues as craft breweries. There's craft malting companies that are starting to start open their doors. And, there might even be some wineries that are kind of seeing the same kind of issues. So the number of breweries as of 2015, this was taken right off the Brewers Association website. Back in 1990, there was 284 breweries in operation. And as you can see, as of 2015, there is now 4,269. So that's roughly a 400% increase from 1990 to 2015. And some of the here's a graphic that shows again, just the sales growth by volume. I mean, a couple of the interesting things to take note is that while this is again of 2015. While the overall beer sales were down 0.2%, craft was up close to 13%. Another thing it's kind of eye-popping is the overall beer market is almost $106 billion. It just shows like the explosive growth. And then almost brand new off the press as of this past Monday, the Brewers Association just released these numbers for 2016. So now there is 5,005 breweries now in operation as of November 30th of this year. So that's roughly a 17% increase from just last year, which again is pretty startling. And then again, the continued growth for the segment is 8%. The other thing that's interesting to note, I mean, it says in the graphic you can see, is that 99% of all the breweries are small and independent. So a quick note on Pennsylvania breweries. Right as of 2015, there was 178 breweries. As the small business development centers, we've had at least 300 breweries or breweries in planning approach us for help with business planning or something along those lines. Again, they're not just craft breweries; they're also industries associated with craft brewing. We have had some craft malting companies approach us because basically the conversation was, hey, we wanted to open a brewery, but we realized that there was already a saturation in the market, so now we're thinking of doing something very closely associated, but still very similar. And you can see the economic impact numbers, the production values. One interesting note in terms of, since this is a sustainability webinar, is that the global average shows it takes about 5 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of beer. So in Pennsylvania alone, that's roughly 20 million barrels alone just to produce craft beer in our state. So what are the environmental issues and trends? Well, for one, we're seeing a lot of wastewater being an issue for startups. We had a few breweries that were planning to open really right out of the gates that they were experiencing some wastewater. They had they had people that were brewing for a number of years, whether they were either professionally brewing or home brewing, and decided to try it out commercially. There was one gentleman in Pennsylvania that he wanted to operate a brewery sort of out of a garage that wasn't a part of his house. Unfortunately, there was no wastewater system associated with his garage, and there was actually a septic tank. So there was the sewage office, or the sewage management officer would not let him discharge into the septic tank. That brewery owner had to basically pick out a different location because he could not operate there. So that was just one example of wastewater. We're always hearing and seeing startup costs, raising capital. I think that's with every small business. In terms of environmental, there's never really a grant or any kind of any kind of grants for just starting a business. Really, it's got to be operational improvement or improving equipment. So, any money that's probably available will be E2 or P2 related. Sorry to use the acronym, but if you're not familiar, E2, P2 is just energy efficiency and pollution prevention. So you can check with your state or local organizations. Also check with your local utilities. A lot of them have financial incentives to increase equipment or operations. And with waste, you talk to a lot of brewers. You ask them, what are you going to do about your waste? And a lot of them immediately think, hey, we're going to take our spent grains and give them to our local farmers. But it is a lot more than that. There's a lot of spent yeast or packaging materials. There is food service or special events. If there's going to be a brewery that's going to be doing a beer festival or some other kind of event, obviously there's waste associated with that. In terms of energy use, I mean, that's a big energy consumer at a brewery. In electricity alone, there's a number of things that consume electric. And then with natural gas, the brew house is obviously a big concern, but there's also packaging, utilities, space heating, etc. It would be good to look for some of the inefficiencies and try to increase your energy usage. So what we would suggest is consider getting an energy assessment done. Look at your state program, see if they offer any assessments. There are a lot that offer free energy assessments. Look at a manufacturing alliance or a government small business program, or maybe even the local utility provider. So one example that recently came in probably within the last month or two is we had a small business that wanted to open a brewery business, and they approached us and said, hey, we have this facility that we purchased. We're looking at operating here, and these are all the issues that we have. And I thought that this kind of perfectly kind of touches on a lot of the issues that any craft brewery or brewery related industry might face. Well, number one, they were planning on utilizing grain from local farms, which is perfectly fine. Support your local community and go that route. But in terms of air quality emissions, I was surprised that this business was already aware of that, because it's not really a common thing that a small business really thinks of. But in this business, they were going to have a boiler and a backup generator. That was immediately when they opened the doors. But when they planned to operate a little further down the line, they were planning on adding a natural gas steam boiler, a biofuel furnace, a grain cleaning device, and they knew that what these pieces of equipment were fueled on did have some air emissions. So they wanted some help with estimating where they actually stood in terms of the air permitting thresholds, to see whether or not they needed an air permit or not for the state of Pennsylvania, or if they could qualify for an exemption. They also ran into wastewater issues. Wastewater disposal was a big one. And then also they wanted to know, if they're going to have a point discharge for their water, would they need a permit? Would they need to talk to their local, their water quality management, their POTW, et cetera, et cetera. So, we were glad that they were talking about water. They were also concerned with the water source, what was in it, how much they were going to use, et cetera, et cetera. So some other environmental considerations just to think is, if you're going to market your brewery, you're going to have a brewery, what's going to be your sustainability efforts? Like, who are you going to market it to? Are you going to market it to your customers? How are you going to market it to the general public? To even your employees? I mean, how are you going to get everybody on board? What's going to be your story that you're going to tell? Are you going to be known for the environmental brewery? Or are you going to just say, hey, this is just kind of one thing in our brewery resume, and say, yeah, we do all these great things, and we brew great craft beer, but we also do all these other great things for the environment. Is donating spent grain enough just to do that, to tell your story? How about being 100% renewable powered? Is that what you want to do, or do you want to look for other kind of alternative energy sources, et cetera, et cetera? And then do certifications or awards matter? I mean, do you want to be a business that attains a lot of certifications or awards and be known for it? And then your local versus global economy. What's your target market going to be? Are you going to focus just on local? Are you going to focus on your community or your city or your municipality? Or are you going to look at a state? Maybe even like a larger regional brewery type. And then of course with that, besides just where you're going to sell your product, where are you going to source your ingredients from? Are you going to go from Yakima Valley for your hops, or a local malting company? where are you going to get your materials from for packaging and for shipping and receiving, et cetera, et cetera. And then charity, if you're going to be brewing beer, I guarantee, or I'm sure Cheri or someone else can talk to you about, people are probably going to ask you to donate some beer or other maybe services or goods. So, if you do charity, if you do donate to charity, are you going to be, focusing on organizations with a focus on sustainability or ones that focus on the community? So it's another thing to consider. And then the location. Besides just picking your facility and the operations, or your employees, can they bike to work? Can the customers use public transit, or do they need to drive to your facility? Are there any other industries nearby? Are you going to be located in an industrial park? Are you going to be located at a nearby gas station? What kind of image or other things do you want to convey? So just some general potential action items. I know this is a kind of a general focus, but one of the things I would suggest is go back to your business plan if you're in startup phases. Even if you are an existing brewery, maybe go back to a section and say, okay, we missed that part in our business plan. We didn't talk about sustainability. Or if you don't have that section, maybe open up your iPad or your iPhone and just write a little section on one of your Word document format, just to say, hey, this is what we're going to do in terms of our operation, to basically address any environmental issues at your brewery. And then how you're going to actually do that. I mean, if you're going to be a one-man show, it's going to be very hard to probably try to do that on yourself. If you have some employees or a small operation, it's probably smart to assemble a team or designate someone to be in charge of environmental and sustainability initiatives. For startups, you want to do your due diligence. You want to make sure you're looking at every nook and cranny before you even open your doors or pick a location. For existing operations, I would say, if you can't do this all yourself, if you're hard pressed, you don't have enough time in the day, find an outside organization. There's plenty of them offered. See if they can do an audit or an assessment of your operations to find efficiencies, eliminate waste, kind of do the best thing. You can seek out a lot of the small business programs. We have a lot of them listed in the resources section that will be at the end of this presentation. And I think I already mentioned it, but there is the presentation download in the bottom right-hand corner. So there are hyperlinks that you can access and take a look at them. This is my contact information. If anybody has a question or wants to follow up, again, you can contact me at the phone number, shoot me an email, or you can visit our website or contact our hotline, toll-free 877-ASK-EMAP number. So I will now turn over to Cheri Chastain at Sierra Nevada and let her talk about all of the great things that the great craft brewing pioneer Sierra Nevada has done and a lot of the sustainability initiatives that they have taken on.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to start with just a brief history about Sierra Nevada so you have an understanding of where we came from and how we got to where we are. We were founded in 1980 here in Chico, California, which is about 100 miles north of Sacramento. So we are in true Northern California. When Ken Grossman founded Sierra Nevada, there's Ken, when he founded Sierra Nevada, he was unable to purchase small brewing equipment simply because it did not exist. There were not manufacturers that were making small equipment that would fit a brewery, a startup size brewery. That has obviously changed dramatically, but when the brewery was founded, Ken built it by scavenging. He went to scavenge yards, he went to dairies that were going out of business to collect stainless steel. He took welding classes at the community college to piece it all together. It was a genuine resourcefulness was part of our ethics right from the founding as a company. We have since grown a little bit. We're now the third largest craft brewer in the United States, and we are the seventh largest brewer overall in the United States. And we are still privately held by Ken Grossman. So being held, under ownership of Ken Grossman, he at his heart understands resourcefulness and being respectful of the resources that we're using, it puts us in a very different situation than most other businesses out there. It allows us to invest in equipment, technologies, or other projects that another company might not be able to justify. What I respect about Ken and what I love about Sierra Nevada is that we're able to balance the environmental with the social, right along with the economics of every decision that we're making within the company. Now, about 6 years ago, the company in Chico, we reached capacity and we were faced with the decision of either expanding in Chico or adding an additional brewery at another location. And we did decide to build a second brewery. We built a brewery outside of Asheville. We're about 20 minutes south of the town of Asheville in Mills River, North Carolina. That brewery, we've been brewing there for almost 3 years. The restaurant's been open for almost 2 years. So it's still a very new facility, but we took all of the ethics and the programs and everything that we had established in Chico, and we had the ability to then implement that in Mills River, but make it better. Do all of the projects that we hadn't done in Chico or thought about after construction had already completed. We had the ability to build those into a brand new ground up brewery. 2 of Ken's children have come into leadership roles for the company. And again, being a privately held, family-owned company, you know, Ken is not wanting to hand off a disaster of a company to his children. He is absolutely respectful of everything that we do and how we do it, and he is really doing his best to set his children up for success in managing the next generation for the company. So I'm sure that some of you have seen this iteration of a sustainability philosophy at some point in your lives, but I wanted to reinforce that, you know, the decisions that we make within Sierra Nevada, it's not strictly economically driven. We are also considering the environmental impacts of the decisions that we're making, but also the social impacts. We're considering how the decisions we're making impact our employees, how it impacts their health, their wellness, their happiness, but also our communities, and what impacts do we have on our community, whether it's resource use or you know, building a zero waste program with our community members. We are a part of the communities that we operate in, both Chico and Mills River, but we're a big part of all of the communities that we sell our beer in, which is actually nationally at this point. So I just wanted to reinforce that when you're thinking about decision making, and if you are wanting to do that sustainably, you do have to consider environmental and social impacts of your decisions equally with the economic decisions as well. We do have a zero waste goal at Sierra Nevada. The zero waste goal, and when I talk to our employees about our zero waste goal, I'm really trying to get them to stretch their minds a little bit and think not strictly about the solid wastes that they're throwing in the trash can, the recycling bin, or the composting bin. Really getting them to think about all of the resources that we use, the energy, compressed air, water, parts, time, labor, beer. All of those are resources that we're spending money on, and if we're wasting any of those resources, we are essentially wasting money. That's not a sustainable way to operate a business. So we do have a goal in place. It's not a policy per se, but it is a goal, and trying to really get employees to engage in all levels of resource use within the company. Our general approach is to we focus on that zero waste philosophy, and again, it's not just the solid waste, it's everything. We look to close loops, so what's coming into our brewery and what's coming out of our brewery, and is there a way to take what's leaving our brewery and recycle that back into our operations? And I have a couple examples of that as we get into this. Auditing, benchmarking, and tracking is so important in building a sustainability program. If you don't know where you're at right now, you're not going to know if you're making any improvements or if you're headed in the wrong direction and making poor decisions that are negatively impacting your business. Benchmarking is a really key part of that. You can benchmark yourself against yourself, or you can benchmark yourself against an industry or a community or some other metric. And then working on tracking, and I'm going to talk a lot more about benchmarking and tracking. Once you have the auditing and benchmarking and tracking in place, then you launch into process and behavioral changes. And really, behavioral changes is going to give you the absolute biggest bang for the buck. Those are the things that you're going to spend very little time and money on, but that are going to have the biggest impacts within your operations. So when you choose your metrics, find the metrics that are right for you. Start with what you have the ability to track. That's usually a good place to start. Look at utility bills, for example. Look at your electricity bill, your water bill, your sewer bill, your waste bills. That's a great place to start because that's information that you already have. I would not get too hung up on industry comparisons. I'm going to talk a lot more in depth about the brewing industry. But I think, every single business is different. Your business, your operation, your organization, wherever you may work, is not identical to any other business out there. So, they're good guidelines and it gives you a good starting point, but again, focus on yourself and benchmark yourself against yourself. And then once you have your metrics, be completely transparent about them. Tell everybody where you're getting the information from, what's included in the information. Set realistic goals. It's great to have the BHAGs, the big, hairy, audacious goals, but it's frustrating when you're not making any progress to achieve your goal. So if you set a realistic goal and then celebrate your achievements, whether it's with a barbecue or a beer or a thank you card, celebrating those achievements helps continue to get people excited about the work that you're doing. So why is tracking so important? Here's an example of, this is actually my home water use. I am the nerd that keeps track of my utilities in an Excel spreadsheet. This is somewhat dated, but I wanted to point out here this gap, the jump that we had from 2011 to 12 at home. That was a $10 difference on my bill from the previous year. There is no way that I ever would have noticed it if I were simply looking at my utility bill, paying it, and moving on. But by tracking the actual volume use, realized, oh my gosh, what happened in June? Turns out I left the front sprinklers on overnight. Maybe we should install a timer. So did that, and it has never happened since. But again, if you weren't looking at it visually as far as a volume usage, you probably would have skipped that, and then you probably wouldn't have invested in that mechanism to control it in the future. So tracking is really important. It can be super simple. This is Excel. Excel is a very common and easy to use tool, so become friends with it if you're going to start a tracking program. And then remember that nobody starts out perfectly. I started with Sierra Nevada in 2006, and when I started with the company, our diversion rate appeared to be 98% diversion from landfill, which was amazing. So I started to wonder why I was hired for the company. But then if you take a deeper dive into your metrics, and this is where you need to find the metrics that are right for you. Now, in the brewing industry, we typically calculate your diversion rate, including spent grain from the brewing process. Now, at Sierra Nevada and the size that we are, we're talking 100 tons a day of that material leaving our brewery. That dramatically skews and it overshadows the real issues that are going on within specifically Sierra Nevada. So I decided to look at it without spent grain in the equation, and that's where we get the blue bar. Now the blue bar, when I started again in 2006, we were right around a 55% diversion from landfill, which is good, but absolutely not great. It took us about 5 years to get to right around a 95% diversion from landfill, and that's currently where we sit right now as a company with spent grain out of the equation. So, even though you might look great on paper in one area, dive a little deeper and again, make sure that those metrics are right for you, and don't get frustrated if you're not best in class right off the bat. It all takes work and it takes time. So the Brewers Association has established a sustainability subcommittee. I co-chair that subcommittee with Katie Wallace from New Belgium. This is the rest of our subcommittee. These are the members that we have. Most of our members are smaller breweries, and that was intentional because most of the breweries that exist, like Jeremy showed, they're very, very small in size and production. So we really wanted to have the input and feedback from those smaller breweries and making sure that the tools and resources that we provide are useful for them. So our subcommittee exists, like I said, to build tools and resources for specifically breweries, but I think there's a lot of the work that we've done that can be moved into other sectors, especially in food and beverage. So the Brewers Association has on the website, we have a sustainability section on the website, and we have a couple tools that are available for free. We have 3 manuals. We have an energy manual, a solid waste manual, and a water and wastewater manual. We have, it's actually in formatting right now, and hopefully will be out right around the start of the year, a deeper dive into wastewater specifically. As Jeremy mentioned, that's a huge problem for craft brewers as they get started or as they intend to scale and expand. So we did a much deeper dive into wastewater specifically, and that should hopefully be out right around the beginning of the year. But what we did in 2015 was embark on a benchmarking adventure. We wanted to get a snapshot of what was happening in the craft brewing industry. What kind of resource use do craft brewers have? And so we went on this benchmarking kind of journey, trying to solicit information from lots of craft breweries of varying sizes. We had a third party that compiled all of that data and created this report. So if you get started on that report, you can download it. Anybody can. You don't have to be a BA member to access it, but you can download the PDF. And I'm going to run through some of the highlights of that report now, but I certainly recommend downloading that if you would like a deeper look into anything that we discovered through the benchmarking process. So these are the geographic regions as defined by the Brewers Association. You'll see Pennsylvania there in the Northeast geographic region. And then we had, this is the kind of a snapshot of who participated. So we had 10 brew pubs, 42 microbreweries, and 27 regional breweries. And you can see the definition there for those 3 different segments. And then we also broke it out by size. So we looked at 1 to 1,000 barrels, and we had 20 breweries participating there. We had 1,000 to 10,000 barrels with 24 breweries, and 10,000 to 100,000 with 23 breweries, and then 100,000 to 1,000,000 barrels, we had 12 breweries. So a decent snapshot. Again, there's more than 5,000 craft breweries, so it's definitely not a robust cross-section, but that was the luck that we had. So here's what we found for average cost. So we collected information from all of these breweries on electricity, natural gas, water, wastewater, solid waste, and carbon dioxide use. We looked at both volume use within each one of those segments as well as cost and what that cost that brewery. And you'll see that in every single size segment, doesn't matter if you brew 500 barrels or 500,000 barrels, electricity is your largest source of annual utilities. It ranges from 44% all the way up to 35% for a larger brewery. But if you want to focus in and target, one of your largest use points, I would start with electricity if I were you. From there, I would move into natural gas. That's consistently the next largest segment within the craft brewing industry. And then we move down from there with wastewater. Again, depending on the size, the larger the brewery, they have a larger slice on wastewater. Smaller brewery has a larger slice of water. And I think a lot of that was what Jeremy was alluding to, is that when you're small, you can sort of fly under the radar, but as you get larger, you have a larger impact on your municipal wastewater treatment system, and they will start to come and talk to you about pre-treatment options or increased surcharges for discharging the volume that you have. So we'll take a look first at energy, both thermal and electrical. I'm going to kind of skip through that one. So if we take a look at electricity, we've got the size of the breweries here broken out into those 4 size categories. The data that we collected, we broke that into the top 25 performers, the bottom 25 performers, and then the middle 50%. So you can see for a small brewery there, they use an average of 140 kilowatt hours per barrel of beer produced. Now the barrel number that we used is the barrels sold, so basically your barrel's packaged, and that was a conscious decision because that's something that most brewers have readily available, largely because you're paying taxes on them. So that was the most consistent number that we could use. So as you're a small brewery, you're going to use a lot. You're going to use a lot consistently in all of these categories, and that's just simply because of economies of scale. So you've got, that goes down to 59 kilowatt hours per barrel, and then down to 25 kilowatt hours per barrel, and then all the way down to 16 kilowatt hours per barrel the larger you become. On the thermal side, similar trend. Smaller breweries start at about 6.1 therms per barrel of beer packaged, and then down to 3.4 therms per barrel, down to 2 therms per barrel, and then all the way down to 1.6 therms per barrel of natural gas used per barrel of beer packaged. So a couple of easy things that you can do to address energy efficiency. Heat recovery is huge, especially in a brewing environment where we have a ton of heat input, but we also have a ton of exhaust heat being generated. So being able to collect and recover that heat and bring that back into your systems through heat exchangers or vapor condensers, that's, again, another example of what's leaving. Heat is leaving. What's coming in? Heat. Let's take what's leaving and recycle that back in and create some closed loop systems. Lighting, equipment, and electronic upgrades are also really easy things to do. There's usually a lot of rebates available for those. Variable frequency drives are also a super easy thing to do and have a really quick payback. Basically, all a brewery is doing is moving and pumping liquids from one process to another. That takes a ton of electrical energy. A variable frequency drive is an easy way to level out that electricity use and only provide the pumping power needed for the volume that you're trying to use. And then education and monitoring, again, I stressed earlier behavior changes, and education is the easiest thing that you can do. For example, if you go into, say, our bottle shop here at Sierra Nevada, and let's just say that we spent $50,000 upgrading our lighting control system. If employees are coming in and overriding that electrical, that lighting management system that you've installed because they don't know how to use it, you've pretty much just wasted $50,000. So making sure that you train employees on the equipment that's in place, how they're supposed to use it, how that equipment is supposed to work and function, and how they can easily identify if something is wrong with that equipment, if there's a leak or if something is broken, so that they can quickly identify that and get that fixed and replaced or repaired. Those are simple things, require very little time, money. They're really difficult. Education is also the hardest thing that you can do with your employee or stakeholder groups, but it's the easiest thing that you can do. Just having conversations with people, training them on the equipment that they're using. And then definitely make sure to talk to your local utility. Like I said, there's usually a ton of rebates available for equipment, for lighting, for electronics. Most utilities will do a what they call sometimes a savings by design or a customized rebate, where if you have a project that you know is going to save either electrical or thermal energy, tell your utility and they might be able to do a customized rebate for you to help offset the cost of the equipment. We do generate a fair amount of electricity on site at Sierra Nevada. In North Carolina, we have 400 kilowatts of Capstone microturbines. Those microturbines are running on natural gas that is, or I'm sorry, biogas that's generated at our wastewater treatment facility there. And then we also installed 2 megawatts of Capstone microturbines here in Chico. Those microturbines are running on natural gas. And then we do have heat recovery, so we're generating steam and soon to be hot water from our capstones here in Chico. And then we also went a little insane with the solar. This is an aerial image of our Chico brewery. So it's large. We've covered all structurally available roof spaces with solar panels, in addition to a 3-acre parking lot that you'll see there in the upper right-hand corner. We have more than capped out our solar capacity here in Chico. We took a similar approach in North Carolina, where we installed another 600 kilowatts of solar power there at the North Carolina brewery, including a couple solar canopies that are right in front of the brewery. So as our guests come up, they get a very strong image of our commitment to renewable energy. A little bit about water. We'll talk just quickly about water. Again, a similar trend here with the larger you are, the more efficient you're able to be with your resources. So we looked at cost as well as how much water it takes to make a barrel of beer. Here's again a similar breakdown. We start at 13.1 barrels of water to make 1 barrel of beer as a small brewer, and then that goes down to 7.3 barrels per barrel produced, and then down to 5.9 and all the way down to 4.5 for a larger brewer. So even for us, Sierra Nevada, it still takes us 4 barrels of water for every barrel of beer that we produce. Couple water saving things that you can do. Automation is costly in some instances, but can have a pretty big impact. So we've automated our CIP or our clean in place systems. We've automated as much as possible. And then putting flow meters on large use points. Again, going back to the graph that I had on why tracking is important. You can track where water is going and how it's being used, and then identify when and if there are problems that you can hopefully address there. And then dry lube is another thing that we did in our packaging, so moving away from a water-based lubricant to a silicon-based lubricant. Hose nozzles, that'll cost you like $4, but really has a huge impact. I can't tell you how many times I walk around and see somebody just holding a hose that's just flowing and they're having a conversation with somebody else, not even paying attention to what they're doing. And then it's so easy and it costs you pretty much nothing. We do recover rainwater in North Carolina in Mills River, and we're using that for irrigation and toilet flushings, but again, trainings and behavior, talking to people, educating people. We do have a kind of large sustainability department here at Sierra Nevada. We have 4 people working in sustainability as a company. I see, and what we've tried to do as a company is really integrate sustainability into everybody's roles. So we do have dedicated people working in this space, but really it's everybody's job. We can't do everything, and we can't be expected to do everything. So a lot of the small brewers, those brewers that you saw on the slide for our subcommittee, most of the people that are on the subcommittee are the owners of the company, and it's just something that they are personally passionate about, and then they integrate that into the rest of everybody's workflow. I see a question here about solar, so I'll go back to solar just for a minute. For brew pubs, that's an interesting one, where solar thermal actually makes a lot of sense for a brew pub situation because of the restaurant and dishwashing that you have going on in that type of work environment. But solar photovoltaic, depending on where you are, and I know the Northeast has a lot of incentives for people to install solar, that's something that can be done on a small scale. You can install 20 panels and still have a pretty big impact. You don't need to go super big or crazy with anything. But honestly, I think energy efficiency should be primary source of focus before generating electricity on site. We do treat our wastewater at both breweries. In Chico, we are recovering the biogas from the wastewater treatment process, and we're using that as a source of fuel for our boilers that then provide the heat that goes back into the brewery that makes the wastewater. In North Carolina, we have a similar approach. We do have a massive anaerobic digester, a 1.5 million gallon anaerobic digester in North Carolina. We're treating not only brewing effluent water, but we're also treating spent yeast through the system. That was a new thing that we did, and honestly, there's not a whole lot of case study information out there on doing that, but it's been working well for almost 3 years. Briefly, I'll talk about CO2 use. It does take a lot of CO2 to make a barrel of beer, so you're purchasing and bringing in CO2, but you're also generating it naturally during the fermentation process. So this is an interesting one where there's a section of the breweries, the 1,000 to 10,000 barrels, that they use the least amount of CO2 per barrel package. So this is one utility that didn't follow the trend of economies of scale. Again, here's the breakdown of what that looks like. There is recovery equipment available, but really the equipment that's available right now only really makes sense at about a 500,000 barrel mark. So if you're brewing more than 500,000 barrels, that's where a recovery system is going to start to make sense. There's not many breweries that are above that size. I do know of a few, I guess, pilot research projects that are happening at a few small breweries. So it's an area that, similar to wastewater, that everybody has realized is a huge opportunity. And so there, to my knowledge, there isn't anything commercially available and widespread for a small scale brewer to recover CO2, but it's definitely being researched and worked on, and there are several breweries that are active in that space. I'll switch gears to zero waste here for a minute. So this is a snapshot of waste diversion. So how much waste is recycled or diverted from landfill through recycling or composting. This is a difficult number for a lot of people to acquire because it really relies on weights and getting weights of material that are leaving your facility, whether they're going for recycling, composting, or landfill. And that's a hard thing to do. So I suggest having conversations with your waste haulers and seeing what kind of weight information they can provide to you to help build that number. Remember that reuse is always preferable to recycling or composting. At Sierra Nevada, every single new employee that's hired is given a insulated reusable coffee mug and a reusable shopping bag. I mean, that's like day one. They come in, they do their W-2 paperwork, and we give them a coffee mug and a shopping bag to set the stage of this is who we are. These are the kinds of behaviors that we expect of our employees. And then recycling does truly save money, and this is a forgotten piece of sustainability programs because it's not sexy. It's not solar panels, it's not fuel cells, it's not microturbines, it's waste. But it still has potential to have a huge economic impact on your business. So here's our pounds diverted from landfill, excluding spent grain. That spent grain is not included in that pounds diverted. The revenue that we receive from selling those materials, so by source separating and collecting cardboard, shrink wrap, glass, scrap metal, you then have the ability to broker that out and sell that to make a revenue. But the biggest bang here comes in the avoided cost. For every ton of material that you send to the landfill, there's a cost associated with that. You're going to pay your hauler to get it there. You're going to pay environmental charges. You're going to pay fuel charges. You're going to pay the landfill tipping fee. You're going to pay bin rental charges. It adds up to quite a bit. And geographically, this number is very different across the country. Here in Chico, that number is an average of about $133 per ton. So for every ton of material that we divert from landfill, that's a ton that we did not send there, which means that we did not pay $133 for that. So if you take our total pounds diverted and look at our avoided costs, that's where you're going to see the biggest cost savings. And then if you include the cost of services, because it does cost to send materials for recycling, you do have to work with brokers and haulers in order to do that. Our average net savings at Sierra Nevada is $335,000 per year. That $335,000, I promise you, more than paid for our entire sustainability department. A lot more than our department. So there's definitely a lot of savings to be had there by having a zero waste program. It's an easy place to start. If you don't have a sustainability program in place, I would start with recycling. It's an easy thing to embark on. Again, source separating will bring in revenue for these materials. And then look to close loops. So, we have a restaurant here at Sierra Nevada generating a whole bunch of food scraps. There was nowhere to compost those food scraps regionally, and after trying for 5 years to get a regional facility, we decided to make the investment ourselves. And so we purchased an on-site composter that generates compost, and then we recycle that right back into our agricultural activities. We have 8 acres of hops here on site at the brewery. We have an additional 2-acre garden for the restaurant, as well as about 120 acres of barley off-site and an additional 3 acres of hops off-site. So we have plenty of uses for the finished compost material. And then Jeremy kind of alluded to some of the recognitions that are out there, and I think you should stop to think, is that something that you would like to pursue as part of your business plan? Or in our case, it served as a validation for the work that we had already been doing. So we had a zero waste program for a long time, but being certified, and we received a platinum level certification, it really reinforced all of the work that we had already done, and it gave us a little more motivation to keep going and to keep working on it. We chose the Zero Waste Business Council certification program because of its robustness. It's not strictly percent diverted from landfill. It looks at the activities that went on to reduce waste. What are you doing to reuse materials? It gives you credit for training employees, for engaging outside of your community, your leadership, for conducting audits. You get points for that. And so really it looks at the entire zero waste picture. And then there is a lot more that I didn't talk about. Sierra Nevada's sustainability program specifically. We do have a sustainability report on our website. You can download that as a PDF. We're just beginning the process of writing our updated version of the report, and we're hoping to have an updated version out by April. But I am certainly available, as a follow-up if you have questions later, anything that we've done or anything that's going on in the industry. I'm more than happy to chat with you. If you're looking to start a sustainability program or you already have one and you want to take it to the next level, I also encourage you to reach out to Jeremy and all of the resources that you have available to you. There's a lot out there to help you. You just have to start asking around and you'll be able to find it. So if anybody has any questions now, feel free to type them into the chat bar and we'll do our best to get those answered for you. Hopefully I answered the two that came in as we were talking.
Hi, Cheri. I think there was a question earlier on. I'm not sure if you touched on it, but Matthew Shover asked about if there was example of behavior changes. If you could provide any examples.
Yeah, I think there's that kind of what I was talking about with training. Making sure that people know how to use what's in place, know what's expected of them, setting clear targets. So we have company goals, and the company-wide goals are now impacting everybody's bonus as a company. We have a water goal this year, and we have a zero waste goal this year. So those goals are helping to drive people's behaviors and drive how they think about things, but really the education piece is the most important. What I have found is as people are educated about sustainability or environmental issues, if they understand why you're asking them to do certain things or change the way they do things, they're more likely to get involved and get engaged.
And Cheri, there's another question that came in. I'm going to start reading a few of them. Has the BA Sustainability Committee found any different issues regarding recycling and sustainability in different regions of the country?
Interestingly, everybody unanimously across the country struggles with the same things. There are just certain types of materials, typically mixed materials, material that's a combination of, say, plastic and metal, like a mylar or foil type material, or things that are a plastic and paper material combined together. Those are universally difficult materials to deal with, doesn't matter where you are geographically. There are certain regions of the country, specifically actually the southeast, that have stronger end-use recycling markets. They have the manufacturing in those regions, so they have a larger appetite for recycled material like paper or metals or plastics or glass. That doesn't, the West Coast has largely pushed out a lot of manufacturing, so it's difficult to have that local manufacturing in certain areas.
There was a question that came in from Derek, who asked if we could go back to the on-site biogas generation slide, but I'm not necessarily sure of the nature of the question. Derek, if you have a follow-up question as to why you want to go back to that slide, maybe Cheri can elaborate. I see you typing. Yeah, you can download a copy of the webinar as well. In the meantime, I'm sorry, I think you missed it. Yeah, Derek, you can download a copy of the presentation at the bottom right-hand corner. But there's another question that came in from Kelly that says, any advice on implementing a sustainability plan to a brewery that has not had sustainability integrated in their original plans? And a little follow-up question, and that may not necessarily understand the importance of sustainability. I can quickly just say, in the resources section, EPA came up with a small business sustainability 2.0 guide that I think is pretty well, was well put together, and it's pretty easy to understand. The other thing I would say, I'll let Cheri go in a second, is Kelly, I mean, if you need some help, seek out one of those small business resources for help in figuring out, a sustainability plan to put into practice.
Yeah, I'll add that even if it wasn't in, say, the original plan, it's never too late. It's never too late to start working on these things. So even if you feel like you're already too far down the road, trust me when I say that you're not. Getting the buy-in, though, that's something that I've universally found is a difficult thing. And what I always come back to, and it depends on how sustainability has been framed in your community. I think, here where I am in Chico, California, sustainability has become synonymous with environmental tree-hugging hippies. And trying to break that kind of mentality, that's not what sustainability is all about. Sustainability is your ability to sustain something, whether that's a lifestyle or a culture, or in this case, a business. Can you continue to do business as you're doing it in 20, 50 years? It's not all about that environmental side. It's more of a balance. It's balancing environmental, social, and economic, and considering all three of those components with equal weight. A lot of times, what might be deemed as a sustainability or an environmental project does have a positive impact on the economics. I think recycling is a perfect case in point. It's a lot of people don't feel like it's kind of one of those touchy feel good things, like pat yourself on the back, congratulations. But really, if you look at it financially, I think Sierra Nevada is a perfect demonstration that we save $335,000 a year by having a recycling program. That tends to pique the interest of those people who have resistance, the people who tend to focus exclusively on financials. So, a lot of my peers, not just within brewing, but outside of brewing, they do tend to focus on the financial side of sustainability projects in order to get the buy-in that they're looking for. There's a great question about how you go about reusing waste and selling it when you don't have space to store it. Excellent question. I would suggest partnering within your community. Talk to your neighbors, talk to the people around you if they are doing similar activities, generating similar materials. Say your neighbor down the street is generating some cardboard and they have some extra space to store it. Maybe you could take it over there and partner with them, and then the two of you could share profits, or whatever that would look like for you guys. But a lot of people have built some really great community partnerships, talking to community nonprofits. Is there a way that they can come and pick up the material, store it, and then serve as the broker, or use it as a fundraising mechanism for them? But I would first suggest talking to your waste hauler and talk to them about what their options are. How much material do you really need to store before they will come and pick it up? Maybe they'll come and pick it up, at a smaller volume than you think you need to store. Talk to your waste haulers, your recycling partners in town, and talk to your local nonprofits and community members and see if you can bolster and strengthen the community efforts of those diversion programs. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think okay. I thought we had a couple more questions, but it looks like a few people are thanking us for your time. Probably most likely you, Cheri. So we greatly appreciate your excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. You guys have my email address, so feel free to reach out if there are follow-up questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all the participants that came on. And then if you're interested, we do have a few more webinars scheduled for the next few months. Stay tuned for the details. The next month we will be focusing on food manufacturing, so that one seems to be an interesting one. But thank you again, and we hope this is helpful. We'll see you later.